Hello there, this is Robert Kornacki, co-founder and CSO at dcSpark. In this presentation, I'm going to go over and finally answer the question for many people, what is Urbit? And specifically, I'm going to take more of a blockchain and crypto perspective while also touching upon many facets of peer-to-peer networks and also why this matters for the everyday user compared to the standard internet we have today. So many of you may have gone to urbit.org yourselves and seen that it says a clean slate OS and network for the 21st century. That's quite vague and hard to really understand. And when you look through all of the notes and different pages, which you can start to learn more and more about Urbit, it's hard to really get a full grasp of the system because there's so many different pieces and an entire vision and its relevance to you as an individual is hard to really put together just because it is so technical. And so in this video, I hope to clear that up. So in speak that most blockchain people will understand, Urbit is effectively a peer-to-peer network that solves off-chain identity, messaging, and computation. He does this from first principles and tries to go not from a blockchain and build on top of it, but go from straight peer-to-peer. What do we require in order for peer-to-peer networks to exist and work well? And then how do we build from that a full encompass system that allows us to unlock all of the benefits and move away from the current internet where it's just all of these mega corporations controlling all of our data, controlling all of the access to the data, right? So if I use Google Docs, I don't have direct access to all the API to do what I want with all the information, or same thing for spreadsheets. Some stuff is accessible, but Google is this middleman who controls how I get to use my data. So even though I write the entire document, they can limit me, they can force me to pay for the API, they can force me to just not be able to do what I want. And in the end, what we end up doing is then going to another service and to another service. And then we get stuck in this whole mindset of software as a service, right? Where middlemen, whether they want to, profit off you, and they always take a fee, a cut for every new feature you want or every new XYZ addition to the base feature set, excuse me. It's effectively, we give away our data, we give away our digital sovereignty to these people, these middlemen companies. And that's specifically because even though the internet was created to be peer-to-peer, it failed to succeed on that vision. And Urbit tries to go, 30 years, 40, 50 years back into the past, start with the fundamentals of the peer-to-peer nature of what computers were supposed to be, and then see what were the issues that caused it not to become peer-to-peer? How do we address those? And then how do we bring that into the future with all the lessons that we have in terms of networking, in terms of programming language theory, in terms of systems, architecture, and design? How do we take all those lessons from all of these years and then bring about a new peer-to-peer network that effectively enables us to not have to live in this world of just middlemen and these big corporations who get to decide how much we have to pay just to do basic things or decide what we can or cannot do with the things we create. And I'm sure many people, you've had pain points at some point where some extra feature suddenly costs you an extra $30 a month. Or for example, I used to have a business using Amazon, and I used to sell on Amazon. And they changed an API, which in the previous iterations of the API allowed you to access certain data, which I used programmatically for some tooling I built. And then they just deprecated that API and then made it impossible to do like 30% of what I wanted to do. And there was just literally no recourse because I was at their whim. That's really what Urbit wants to address, is fix the underlying architecture of not having everything be server client, which is what the internet currently is, but allow everyone to have their own personal Urbit server, their own personal Urbit node, what's called a ship. And in that holds all your data, that holds all the permissions and everything that you want, and it has a programmatic ability to do anything you can imagine or you can code with that data, and thereby you unlock all the power. And so rather than having to pay for 27 different SaaS services that control all your data, that have individual identities, which we'll get into in a moment, that don't work with each other, they're not composable. And instead of being stuck in this current world of an internet where we have effectively these middlemen who act as if they're overlords, but all they do is cause us problems and try and extract more and more value out of us, we can go back to the initial idea of the internet of a truly peer-to-peer system where we decide what we do with the documents we write, with the code we write, with all of the organizations we build. We want to bring all that back into our power so that we can then keep building more and more advanced capabilities. So, how does this relate to crypto? Urbit provides, as I mentioned, a from first principles really streamlined solution for solving off-chain and on-chain identity, off-chain messaging, and off-chain computation. Blockchain sucks in all of these things, and everything's moving off-chain. But the off-chain world is not really fine-tuned at this point. So for example, some of you may have used Gnosis Safe. It's a multi-sig scheme in the Ethereum ecosystem. It works really well, but it only works really well because they move all of the signing off-chain. But then to do that, there is no solution, besides Urbit, for off-chain identity and messaging that works well, it's seamless, it makes sense, it integrates with the blockchain. And so for Gnosis Safe, they just have servers and everyone shares their signatures through their servers. If their servers go down, tough luck. If their servers get hacked or the front-end clients, say there's like a DNS attack and a new front-end gets implemented that doesn't encrypt your data and then goes to a server where they can read your signatures or potentially do a man-in-the-middle attack, you're liable to that. And so this is kind of the problem where we have no good solution for blockchains for the off-chain story. It's literally just, talk to other people via Telegram, Discord, ... or use a centralized server which someone hosts and hope that works. Blockchains don't work well for messaging because it's a centralized state that everyone wants to mutate and update. You can't span everyone's message for every application into a blockchain because that's just literally, infinite amount of data constantly being created each and every day and infinitely expanding as we go further and further into the internet taking over the world in every sense. And so a blockchain can't support that. What that means is we have to rethink about what blockchains really need to do. And this is why everyone's moving to off-chain solutions, why rollups are getting bigger, and a lot of focus on blockchains for data availability and verification, but not actually execution. Because blockchains really excel and they really provide awesome environments that can't be reproduced in any other sense for guaranteed validation and data availability. However, they suck at mass distributed messaging. They don't work for identity, and for computation, they're way too costly. We can see if Ethereum things go, crazy out of bounds. And it's not like we have half the world on blockchain yet. And so Urbit effectively acts as this ideal companion to the blockchain world, where blockchains are amazing and they will continue to exist. And we at dcSpark are building on top of a lot of blockchains. And we really do believe this technology is here to stay. But we have this same conviction for Urbit as well. And what's really exciting about Urbit is that it's been worked on for many years. And so it's really, from a fundamental level, from first principles, it's approaching the problems not as a get-rich-quick scheme to just, we solved the off-chain issues of blockchain, we're selling a token, yada, 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 and they want to make millions in a pump and dump. Urbit technically even started by the founder prior to Bitcoin, but then it was a very, very small pet project. But it seriously took off in the teens, the 2013, 14, 15, etc. And effectively, because of its first principle approach at trying to solve peer-to-peer computing, networking, and identity, it actually slots in to be the perfect companion for blockchains, even though it wasn't built for that. And what that gives us is that we know it's an actually good system, because good systems are built from first principles that make sense, and then on top of that, you have the ability to see what else their potential unlocks. When Bitcoin was first created, no one could envision what DeFi would become today. But it was possible because so many fundamentals and many things were built on top of that to move from Bitcoin into all the smart contract platforms. But those fundamental first principles are what allowed for all that to spring up. And likewise, Urbit is that same truly unique network and innovation that solves many of the peer-to-peer problems and which we have today, which slots into the blockchain story so nicely that no one really would have ever imagined. And this is why we at dcSpark are at the forefront of trying to bring all the infrastructure of Urbit and make it ready for the blockchain world so that we can start to integrate both sides of these and really get a lot of new innovation, new solutions, and eventually new products that can really change the entire experience, potentially of DeFi, or anything within the blockchain context. So, with that spiel, let's kind of jump into what Urbit is more on a practical basis. So, Urbit is effectively a peer-to-peer node network. You own an Urbit ship, and an Urbit ship is effectively taking an Urbit identity and running it with the Urbit runtime. So this is just an executable program. So for example, as you can see right here, this is a terminal on a Linux system. Urbit is effectively just a command line node like this, which you start up. And when you start up, it connects to the network using your identity. Without an identity, your Urbit ship can't even boot. It doesn't even understand what existence is without having an identity. This is strictly different compared to the current internet, where IPs don't have this strong connection to your computer, to your operating system. And so this seems maybe to some like a small difference, but this actually means that your Urbit ship cannot exist without an identity. And that means every Urbit ship that does exist has an identity, and because Urbit is built based off of a peer-to-peer hierarchy that specializes on finding your Urbit ship quickly and easily, no matter where it is on the entire Earth, no matter geographically where it lays. Because of the hierarchy of Urbit's ships and how they're built, if I know your Urbit ship identity, which is reasonably human readable, like this, so mouse is bosnet markrex nomdep, I can send messages to you. I can do peer-to-peer computation. I can directly send you signatures, ask you to sign something, you send me a signature back. We effectively have the ability to do anything end-to-end encrypted just by knowing each other's names, and we can save this like in an address book, have this all automated, and have a seamless experience that integrates into crypto wallets using something called Urbitvisor, which is a product that we at dcSpark are creating, and which I'll show you in a moment. But effectively, Urbit solves all of this because every single Urbit peer-to-peer node, called a ship, has an identity attached to it. This identity is attached to the rest of the network, and the network is designed so that anyone in the entire world who has another Urbit ship can end-to-end encrypted find me and talk to me via my ship without having to talk to me offline. We don't have to share IPs or anything. This is all automatically done for us. And in a matter of seconds, I can have never talked to you before. I just know your name, and suddenly now we can be computing peer-to-peer, end-to-end encrypted, no middleman, no one can charge us extra for what we're doing, no one does anything in between us because we have this entire network which facilitates the node discovery between us and then allows us to do everything directly peer-to-peer. So, related to the identities, there is an actual hierarchy, as I mentioned. So there are planets, stars, and galaxies. Besides that, there's also comets and moons. Moons are sub-identities underneath planets, stars, and galaxies. And comets are temporary identities that you can create quickly, but they're kind of seen as spammy or typically maybe used for bots or other sorts of things. So typically what you want is, as a human being, you want an Urbit planet to be your identity. An Urbit star is one step above a planet, and an Urbit star is effectively the sponsor or the parent of a planet. And a star has certain responsibilities, such as ensuring that updates, software updates of the operating system, the kernel, and so forth, can get propagated down to the child, the planet, among other responsibilities, and also the ability to offer other services to their planets as well. Above stars, there are galaxies, and galaxies are the fundamental root nodes of Urbit, of the hierarchy. And so stars have galaxies as their planets, and then they also pass down updates, but also do routing and potentially even packet routing for people behind firewalls who can't get through peer-to-peer to speak with other people. And so effectively, stars and galaxies act as more nodes which support the ecosystem itself and the network, while a planet is a personal identity that you use. Without this hierarchy, because there's other peer-to-peer networks that have tried to do a purely flat plane of identities, but you always run into the issue where you can't find someone else quickly. Because we have this hierarchy, I can talk to someone else who has a parent which is a different star, and that star is under a different galaxy. I can talk to them very quickly because all that has to happen is I have to simply go up the hierarchy to the galaxy level, ask my galaxy, which can talk to the other person's galaxy, because all of the knowledge of who has which parent and which galaxy as their grandparent is all known. And so it's very easy for me to go to the galaxy level, ask the galaxies figure out the IP of the planet that has it as a child, then it relays that back to me, and within, let's say, 3 to 6 requests, you can already know a planet or a moon's IP, so then you can directly talk with them. In flat hierarchies, or in non-hierarchical peer-to-peer networks rather, that can't happen. And so let's say we have one day 600,000 people on the network, or even 20 million. It does not scale, because if I only have your name, and let's say you're in the other side of the world, and all the peers that I talk to don't know any of the peers that you talk to, it can literally take 500,000 people each asking each other, hey, do you know this person? 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 And they say, no, 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 no. And so it can literally take hours, potentially, depending on how propagation goes, for me to talk to you if I don't know I don't know your IP, but I just know your name in a flat hierarchy network. And that doesn't scale. The more people that go, the worse and worse and worse that gets. And so if we want to envision 4 billion people on a flat hierarchy peer-to-peer network, that doesn't scale. Hierarchies, like what Urbit has, do scale, because that's a pretty static, like I said, 3 to 6 requests. I forget the exact current implementation, but somewhere around there. And so that's very quick to do, and it makes it possible to find people within the Urbit ecosystem, get their IPs, and effectively talk to them very quickly, even if you've never talked to them before. This node discovery issue is a very big problem in peer-to-peer systems, and that is what Urbit solves completely. Furthermore, each of these identities on Urbit is Sybil resistant. It is Sybil resistant because it is an NFT on a blockchain, specifically right now Ethereum. What this means is that Urbit is not built on a blockchain, but it uses a blockchain to ensure Sybil-resistant identities via NFTs. So these are some of the very first actually uniquely phenomenological NFTs. You could, play it that way, wherein owning the NFT allows you to boot up an Urbit ship, which is entirely unique, access the network, and have a persistent identity that you can use to talk to other people, to use services, or to do literally anything on the entire internet or on the Urbit network as well. What this means is that, like I was saying before, you have all these SaaS applications in the current world, and they all control your data, but they also control your identity. And this is something many people do not realize. You understand, you have a password manager with 7,000 different accounts, but these accounts aren't fungible, they're not composable, and so even though you're the same person on every different service, you're a different person, you're a different identity, because it's not unified. And there's some blockchain projects that have tried to do identity, but they sucked. The reason they sucked is that they didn't solve off-chain messaging. And an off-chain or on-chain identity system without off-chain messaging is bound to fail. Because all that means is that you're going to ask everyone to integrate into your identity system, but you provide no benefits. You're just saying, hey, we have this cool identity system, you should use us. No one cares to do that, to integrate those, because it's just more work. And why will you win as an identity system when 5 other identity systems all exist and they all offer the same benefits because they're just identity? Urbit has Sybil-resistant identities with a peer-to-peer off-chain messaging network that solves the peer discovery problem. And it all packages that together in a brand new system, which also has its own programming language and many other features that are cool, which we'll get into in a moment. And this allows the cost-reward analysis for Urbit identities as a global system that can be used across services and across application and in various contexts, even across different blockchains. It actually makes sense because the off-chain peer-to-peer messaging problem is inherently extremely hard to solve. And you can't solve off-chain peer-to-peer messaging without identity. You can't solve identity, Sybil-resistant off-chain peer-to-peer identity, without messaging. And so Urbit is the very first system that takes both of these together and provides them in a way that makes sense. And now with Urbit Advisor and with other work we're doing at dcSpark with the Authenticate with Urbit ID Gall agent, we're effectively building out the infrastructure so that you can actually use this identity and also all the power of your Urbit ship on the internet today, but also with blockchains via web dApps. And so we'll get to that in a moment, but let's finish up with identities first. So these identities, as I mentioned, are NFTs on Ethereum. And what's cool is that because they're Sybil resistant, because they're NFTs, they're unique, they also have inherent value. And especially stars can spawn many planets, and galaxies can spawn stars. Yes, sorry. So galaxies can spawn stars, stars can spawn planets, and each of these have value and a fixed cap supply. This means that they also are useful as assets because they have value. Current star prices are about 25k-ish, give or take, and then galaxy prices are ranging from 500k to 2 to 4 million right now, depending on how many stars they spawned. And so these have inherent value. So something cool that's been worked on is to integrate with blockchain and Urbit is something called WStar. These are stars which have been wrapped if they have not been used to spawn any planets. And then they've been made into a fungible token called WStar. This effectively allows people to jump into the Urbit ecosystem from a financial standpoint by buying WStar on Uniswap, which is currently available, V3. And so effectively, you can expose yourself to the upside of Urbit without even having to own NFTs, but jump in via a fungible token. This is something that I just wanted to mention just because it's an interesting facet that's brand new in the ecosystem, and it's something that anyone in a blockchain context will be quite interested in. Now, as I mentioned before, Urbit is a peer-to-peer node that's really from first principles. And as is on the Urbit website, it's a clean slate OS. And so what that means is that it actually has its own programming languages. It has two languages, Nock and Hoon, where Nock is kind of like assembly and Hoon is kind of like C, from the perspective of system architecture. Hoon is a programming language that's more functional approach, more akin to Lisp. And so the coding which you do in Hoon, as you can see, is a little bit different. However, people who get used to coding in Hoon actually find it to be a great language to code in because the design of Hoon and Nock is deeply integrated into the system architecture of the Urbit node, of the Urbit OS itself. And what this means is that unlike C or assembly, which does not natively even really understand the concept of networking, because networking was added on top of like the Unix stack, the actual way of building applications inside of Urbit is deeply integrated into the language, and the fact that you have identity and networking, they're actually baked in on a fundamental level in Hoon so that you don't have this weird problem of trying to create networked applications like you do in Unix, Windows, Mac, etc. because they're just two systems, duct tape on top of each other. And that's why everyone doesn't use C to do networking, or pretty much no one does. But with Hoon, everything is actually integrated, so your identities are first class, they're understandable, and they work perfectly with all of your applications. Networking is understood, and actually Urbit provides guarantees based off of its architecture that any message you send out, as long as you have connectivity to the rest of the network, will be delivered. And so from an application standpoint, I don't have to care. If I send a message, it'll get there. I don't have to do 20,000 lines of retry logic, checking the ACKs and everything. That's all integrated in the kernel. And so the idea is that by creating a proper peer-to-peer node / OS that solves all these problems with fundamentally solid languages within the node that enable using all of these primitives in a way that's seamless and clear, and in a way where you have longevity of the language itself, we now have something that's phenomenologically novel compared to the old world of Unix systems and networking that cannot be replicated by just adding another piece of software to your Unix stack. That just fundamentally can't do the same thing because we need an entire system that encapsulates all of these different parts and unifies them seamlessly in order to have the same benefits of Urbit. So, not to make this video drown on too long, I want to show you what Urbit is today. So as I mentioned, it's a node you run in the CLI. There is also a GUI application that allows you to get up and running without having to deal with the CLI. This is called Port. Feel free to Google and check it out. But once you boot up an Urbit node, this is effectively what you see. What this is effectively the home page where you have different tiles of backend applications you have installed. You have the ability to look at other ships and see what software they have and maybe install the Bitcoin wallet, for example. You have the ability to enter into different applications. In this case, Groups is the most popular application, which everyone uses. And this is effectively for chatting, sharing notes, and sharing links with other people on Urbit, as it is a peer-to-peer network. This is quite cool and exciting, but we at dcSpark are really excited about the potential, as we said, about blockchain and Urbit coming together. And that's why we created UrbitVisor. So UrbitVisor is a web extension which transforms your web browser into a first-class Urbit client. So then rather than being stuck in a web page, which is a GUI for your Urbit ship, everywhere you go on the internet, no matter what web page you're on, you have access to all of the power of Urbit right here. So what UrbitVisor does is it allows you to add a ship, which means put in your credentials to connect to your Urbit ship. This then gets encrypted locally into the UrbitVisor extension, similar properties of security as MetaMask or Flint wallet, which is our crypto wallet, or any other light wallet you're used to. And then it stores that and makes it possible for you to go and then simply connect to your ship using a password, which decrypts your credentials, connects to the ship, and now you have a live connection in your web browser that any web page, web app, or web extension can interact with. Furthermore, right here, as you may see, we have Urbit Dashboard, which is a web app we created. What Urbit Dashboard has is effectively a system for connecting to Urbit Visor that requires permissions. And so, for example, right there, I just deleted the permissions for my Urbit ship. And if I try to open the web page, to unlock the web page, it keeps asking me to connect to a ship on Urbit Visor. When I go ahead and do that, if I click connect again, it says open your Urbit Visor to grant permissions. So Urbit Visor acts as a firewall that guarantees the safety of all of your data on your Urbit ship by forcing all of the applications and web extensions to request permissions before they can do anything. And so here, once I grant permissions, as you can see, Urbit Dashboard automatically got the event that Urbit Visor gave it permissions. Then it parsed data from my Urbit ship, and then it read the one group that I have on that Urbit ship. And just like that, all this peer-to-peer functionality is now exposed to Urbit Dashboard. And so likewise with Urbit Visor, I can disconnect from one ship. As you can see, it auto-detects it via Urbit Dashboard. I can then switch to my other moon here. I can confirm, connect there. Similarly, grant permissions. Boom, bada boom. And just like that, it registers that, parses data, and as you can see, it gets all of it from my Urbit ship. Once you've already accepted permissions, if you visit Urbit Dashboard again, and you're already connected to your Urbit ship, it automatically detects that for you and goes forward from there. The Urbit Dashboard, I've already gone over in previous videos, but it's an example of a web app that devs and users can start to see the benefit of what Urbit can provide on the web and how we can start to move forward into incorporating Urbit into web apps and also specifically in web dApps and in blockchain ecosystems. To emphasize just what is possible, we're also developing a web extension, a UV extension for Twitter that allows you to share tweets. And this is a very early UI, so please note that we're updating this and it's going to get a lot better than this. But effectively, it allows you to share tweets at a moment's notice by simply clicking a button that is injected on every single tweet on on Twitter, and then bring that content over into your Urbit ship for archival purposes or to share with other people. Furthermore, we're also going to be adding an unroll feature. So just like you have all these, once again, men in the middle, these applications or bots that live and unroll threads on Twitter and then store them on a website, and that's all held on someone else's server. We're enabling you to unroll Twitter threads directly onto your Urbit ship. And so if you find some content that's 50 tweets long, that's really high value, you can save it and archive it via just clicking a button, clicking unroll, and that soon will be available within the next month and will effectively allow anyone to start to take a lot of the useful content and bridge it into Urbit. And that's what's kind of cool about Urbit Visor, is it enables anything that exists on the current internet, whether it's content, functionality, web dApps, or otherwise, to be integrated directly with Urbit, to now have all this power of a personal node that has a premier Sybil-resistant identity, peer-to-peer messaging and networking, and off-chain computation. So once that data is on my Urbit ship, I can choose to do whatever I want with it. I can save my own tweets, tweet threads, and unroll them, put them potentially behind a paywall where people have to send me Bitcoin for. All of this potential is available, and it's up and coming in the Urbit ecosystem. And so with Urbit Visor and with all of the innovations of Urbit itself, we're starting to move towards a future where we don't just have all these middlemen services, these big corporations that tell us what we can or cannot do with our data, that force us to pay stupid fees, that sell our data to third parties. We remove them from the equation so that we don't have to try and argue with them, but instead we build better software from better first principles that prevents them from even entering into the equation so that we don't have to go through all these problems. And even in the blockchain context, we don't have to try and squish everything into this global consensus layer that is blockchain, but we instead use blockchain for what it excels in, and then we can use Urbit for everything that's vital in the off-chain peer-to-peer networking context. And with the two pieces of decentralized blockchains and Urbit as this ideal peer-to-peer messaging network, we have the potential to really recreate the internet from scratch to some degree. And this is extremely exciting because we've never been at a point where we have both of these pieces from a financial and a networking standpoint. The internet has always been centralized. We're finally at the point where the infrastructure, the tooling can all get to the point where we can build these truly new systems that could have never been imagined before, even 15 years ago. And with all of the hype behind blockchain, Urbit now has the potential to really slot into ecosystems with a lot of value and to really multiply both what blockchain can do and what Urbit can do. And this synergy of both of these sides of the equation is truly what we at dcSpark believe is the future. We don't think blockchains will succeed without an off-chain peer-to-peer solution, and we don't see an off-chain peer-to-peer network that solves messaging, identity, and off-chain computation. We don't see that succeeding without blockchains integrating tightly into that as well. And that's why we at dcSpark are at the forefront of building Urbitvisor, building different applications on top of Urbitvisor. Eventually want to look at integrating Urbitvisor support in Flint Wallet, our crypto wallet. And so effectively, we believe this is the future that's up and coming. We want to build the infrastructure to make this possible, to make this path clear, allow developers to get onboarded, keep improving the API for Urbitvisor so that it's so simple to use that one day JavaScript and TypeScript devs who know almost nothing about Urbit can just use it as this seamless backend that they just integrate with, and it just works. Effectively, we see, and at least I know personally on a fundamental level, that this is the future. And I'm pushing to make sure that we can start to see and bear the fruits of all of this fundamental, low-level work that's been done in Urbit, all of this fundamental work that's done in blockchain. There's so much potential there, and bringing those together, there's really, many orders of magnitude better that we can get for both average people, everyday users, and for the ecosystems themselves. There is so much that needs to be done, and trying to restart from scratch by trying to do peer-to-peer solutions on blockchain doesn't really make sense, and it's been tried again and again, and it's failed. By taking Urbit and blockchain, building out the infrastructure for each so that they're both really solid, and over the years now, as we intend to move forward, we want to keep building all of this out so that they work seamlessly together and the benefits of each multiply. We think that within 2 or 3 years, there can be serious experiences in regards to reimagining what's possible in DeFi, what's possible from the standpoint of not just having everything run on Google servers, but actually owned by individual users in their own peer-to-peer nodes, running both blockchain nodes, running both Urbit, and jumping between all of these different pieces of tech. We know it's possible to get this as seamless as possible so that everyday users can use MetaMask or Flint Wallet, which we're building, Urbitvisor, and all of these tools with just a few clicks. Everything works really well, and all of this new functionality is exposed to the end user, but with a seamless experience, so that even if they don't understand from a philosophical standpoint all the benefits of what's going on, the experience truly creates brand new UX and brand new possibilities that were never possible before. And thereby, by building out the infrastructure and all the different pieces, we don't just convince people on a ideological level that having these megacorps control all our data, charge us lots of money, sell our data, and be stuck in these systems where we don't actually own our data and content or identity. We can bring all that back, but not just convince everyone because, oh, this is the better way, but actually providing the tools that show it's actually better, create experiences that were never possible before. And ideally within the next year or two, but I truly believe within the next 2 or 3 years, it's going to be hard for anyone to argue against the potential of Urbit, because as we keep building all these integrations, it's only going to get better and better and better. And then eventually it's either going to be, the choice of using Urbit and having all this brand new power, or being stuck in the world of all these, AWS and corporations, which don't have your best interest at heart. They just want to make lots of money. And so by really focusing on things from first principles, just like how Bitcoin really went from first principles and reimagined the financial stack, we can really reimagine the internet, reimagine how we can integrate this brand new financial stack into a brand new internet, and put it all together to go into a future where we can truly see, a new horizon that's never been possible before. And so with all of that said and done, I want to finish up this video as it's been going on for a little bit long, but suffice to say, Urbit is effectively a one-of-a-kind solution to the off-chain peer-to-peer identity, messaging, and computation. There's no other system like it out there. It's been in the works for years and years and years, and it's finally gotten to the point where it's actually usable because it's fundamentally trying to solve so many complex problems. And so now is the point where it's really a moment to be excited for, because so much is happening in blockchain that it really spurred on this excitement for peer-to-peer systems. And Urbit's really the only option out there that's taken all of this seriously and tried to come up with solutions that make sense and that scale properly. And so with these two brand new pieces of technology, we at dcSpark are excited to jump behind both, keep building up ecosystems for both, and hopefully be one of the companies that are truly at the forefront of pushing this peer-to-peer revolution and making products and solutions that, users like you, and maybe even eventually entire ecosystems, can start to build off of and then create experiences that were never possible before. In short, Urbit is something that I think we all need. Specifically, it's something that all the blockchain ecosystem out there need, but it's not something that they've understood that they need yet. We're going to be doing our best to make that more and more obvious by building out the ecosystem. And I hope you can join me as a part of this. And I think what we'll see in 2 or 3 or 4 years is going to be really, really exciting and genuinely surprising compared to where we are today. Thanks again for watching. I'm Robert Kornacki, CSO at dcSpark. Have a great day.